At 07:42 a.m. on 20th of May, 1942, over open seas east of Midway Island, 4 Grumman F4F Wildcat fighters slice through mist-grey sky. Each one flanks the carrier USS Yorktown in protective formation. Ensign Thomas Carlson grips the stick of his Wildcat, coolant gauge trembling, engine humming at full throttle. Alarms crack over the radio. Bogies inbound, 15 to 20 A6M Zeros at 0500. His wingman flashes the signal, Zeros diving from cloud cover. In that instant, Carlson knows the Wildcat's famed durability is outmatched by the Zero's climb and turn rate, but ahead lies a new formation, devised by Squadron Commander John S. Thach, a planned weave meant to turn the tables. The Wildcat becomes bait, the Zero becomes the trap. As white-hot tracer streams past his canopy, Carlson banks sharply into the maneuver. This moment will decide more than his fate. It will mark the turning point in how US naval aviators fight dogfights. 06:15 a.m., flight deck of USS Yorktown, CV-5, Pacific Ocean, muffled thunder from the steam catapult, wet steel under boot heels, the scent of aviation gasoline and brine. Ensign Carlson climbs into his Wildcat, radio set to channel 2, throttle pinned. He glances at his squadron patch, VF3, Fighting 3. 2 squadrons of cruisers and destroyers steam in formation below. Commander Thach addresses the pilots in the ready room. Our enemy climbs faster. Their turn is tighter. Our turn is slower. But we will win. Carlson nods, grips the stick, feels the weight of the Wildcat's 650 caliber machine guns, 4-inch bullet belts, the armor plating heavier than anything the A6M Zero carries. He thinks of the intelligence bulletin from 22nd September 1941. Enemy Mitsubishi A6M Zero, superior rate of climb and maneuverability. The engines roar, the deck crew counts down. Carlson launches. Below, water churns white as the Yorktown recedes. The mission, intercept incoming Japanese strikes. A simple objective, but vital. The catapult jolts him skyward, G-force pressing him into the seat. His altimeter climbs past 500 feet. Ahead, grey clouds bank toward the horizon. He keys his radio. Hook 2 airborne. The reply crackles back. Roger, Hook 2, Vector 090. He banks into formation, watching his wingman's Wildcat pull alongside, 200 yards to starboard. The morning light catches the propeller blur, casting shifting shadows across his instrument panel. Records later showed that 18 Wildcats launched that morning from Yorktown's deck. Carlson was among the first wave. 0:45 a.m., hangar deck beneath Yorktown's flight deck. Naval aviation machinist Tom Hopkins sits bent over a Wildcat's engine panel, its Pratt & Whitney R1830 Twin Wasp rotor turning slowly under test. The technicians whisper among themselves. A fuel pressure drop was recorded in the maintenance log at 23:17 the previous night. Hopkins tightens a nut with a torque wrench, wipes his oily forearms on his stained jumpsuit. He knows the Wildcat is underpowered compared to the Zero, heavier airframe, less climb rate. He thinks of Commander Thach's nightly experiments in the ready room. With matchsticks on the table, I sketched 2 plain weave paths, Thach later recalled in his after-action reports. Hopkins's goal tonight: ensure every Wildcat can execute the weave without throttle surging or hydraulic failure. He checks the flex of wing spars, toggles radio connections, inspects the oil reservoir level. Outside, the deck rumbles as aircraft return from evening patrol. The sound echoes through the steel bulkheads, a metallic shudder that never quite fades. Hopkins straightens, his back aching from 3 hours hunched over machinery. He knows tomorrow's fight depends on this midnight work, on fuel lines that don't freeze at altitude, on gun mechanisms that don't jam under G-force stress. He logs hydraulic pressure within operational limits in neat handwriting and turns off the heavy work lights. The hum of generators echoes through the empty hangar. Above him, pilots sleep. Below him, the ocean churns. In between, Hopkins keeps the machines flight-worthy. The night log shows 12 aircraft cleared for morning operations. 08:30 a.m., airspace above the task force. Carlson and his wingman, Ensign Harold McAllister, climb to 18,000 feet. Carlson feels cold air leak around his pressure suit, the fabric tight against his chest. He tracks his wingman's Wildcat 200 yards to starboard, watching the plane's shadow cross the cloud layer below. They key in emergency signals. Hook for bait and juke for the hook wing maneuver. McAllister signals ready with a wing waggle. They know the Zero outclimbs them by roughly 50 feet for every 10 seconds of ascent, but they also know their tactic. Two-plane element, side by side, crossing paths when the Zero chooses one target. The technical briefing echoes in Carlson's mind. When the enemy locks onto the bait, the hook plane will weave toward the bait's tail after a 90-degree turn, catching the pursuer in a crossing shot. Carlson's heart pounds as they hear radio chatter. Bogey bandits headed 175 degrees at 22,000 feet. McAllister checks his guns. Carlson watches the horizon. Small truths make themselves known. The Wildcat's canopy glass wobbles under G-force. The stick vibrator warns of approaching structural overload limits. The only flaw in their plan, fuel range, is limited to roughly 1 hour 40 minutes at combat power, and they must conserve for the return to ship. Carlson glances at his fuel gauge, 92% remaining. He tightens his oxygen mask, tastes rubber and stale air. A tiny speck appears ahead against the cloud layer. Enemy fighters approaching fast. The weave must begin. McAllister's voice crackles over the radio. Tally-ho, let's show them what we've got. 09:02 a.m., 20,500 feet, 5 miles ahead of the task force perimeter. Carlson watches a formation of 12 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters diving toward them, escorting Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers below. The Wildcat group banks into defensive position. Carlson calls, "Hook now." He banks right, McAllister banks left, an instantaneous crisscross pattern. The Zero assigned to Carlson's tail picks him as prey and dives in tight pursuit, closing at 300 knots. The instructions Thach printed in his tactical notes echo in Carlson's mind. Bear toward your wingman as the enemy draws you off, then let him finish the target. Carlson dives beneath his wingman's flight path, then rolls hard right, forcing the Zero to follow. He feels G-force press him deep into his seat. The pressure suit inflates around his legs. Over his intercom he hears McAllister's shout, "On his tail!" Carlson pulls right, leads his crosshair ahead of the Zero's belly as the enemy pilot realizes the trap too late. He fires, a 2-second burst. Tracer rounds glow orange-white in the morning light. The Zero's engine coughs black smoke, then erupts in flame. The aircraft rolls inverted and falls away, tumbling through cloud cover. Carlson's heart leaps, then cools as training takes over. One confirmed kill, but they're far from safe. Enemy fighters split around them, turning high and repositioning for another attack run. They still have to get home. Carlson checks his fuel gauge, 78% remaining. He's pushed deep into enemy airspace and the Japanese numbers are still overwhelming. McAllister's voice. "That's one for the history books." Carlson doesn't reply. He scans the sky for the next threat, knowing the fight has only just begun. 09:35 a.m., 24,000 feet, over open ocean. The Wildcat group is battered from sustained engagement. One plane limps back toward the carrier, its left wing shredded by 20mm cannon shells. McAllister reports his hydraulic system pressure fluctuating on the gauge. Carlson glances behind. He sees a thin trail of smoke streaming from his wingman's engine cowling. Down in the Combat Information Center aboard Yorktown, Commander Thach listens to the radio log traffic. VF3, this is Yorktown Actual. You're 12 minutes fuel to home base. Thach's face remains calm, but his eyes stay sharp, tracking the combat air patrol positions on the plotting board. He already knows the new tactic works in practice, but only if executed cleanly, and only if mechanics like Hopkins keep the machines flight-worthy under combat stress. Carlson grips the stick tighter, watches the sea glint metallic grey under scattered sunlight. He remembers Hopkins bent over engine panels at midnight, greasy hands checking every connection. He realizes that innovation isn't just flight deck bravado or tactical genius. It's the hours under deck, the greasy hands, the unsung mechanical checks that keep aluminum and steel airborne. Then his intercom crackles urgent. "Break dive starboard. 0 on your 6. A Japanese fighter picks McAllister's tail, closing fast from above. Carlson yells acknowledgement, banks hard left, then dives to build speed. The Zero overshoots McAllister's sudden deceleration, exposing its underside. McAllister rolls inverted and fires a deflection shot, 3 seconds sustained. The Zero's fuselage erupts in flame and the aircraft breaks apart. Second confirmed kill for the flight. Carlson's voice cracks over the radio. 2 down. How many more to go? The question hangs unanswered as they turn southwest toward home. Fuel gauges dropping, ammunition counters reading half depleted. The sky remains contested. 10:10 a.m. Carrier perimeter defense zone, 11,000 feet altitude. The Yorktown reports torpedo bombers inbound. The Wildcat patrol must climb and engage again. Carlson's thumb hovers over the gun safety toggle, muscle memory taking over. He knows the Wildcat is slower in vertical climb. He advances throttle to maximum rated RPM, 2,700 revolutions. The radio crackles with urgent traffic. VB3 being engaged, enemy worming in from port side low. Thach orders another immediate interception. The same group of Zeros has circled back after breaking off earlier, regrouping for a coordinated strike. Carlson's wingman is still managing damaged hydraulics. The pressure gauge needle fluctuates between green and yellow zones. The Wildcat shows no warning lights yet, engine temperature holding steady. Carlson maneuvers into combat formation, McAllister holding position 200 yards to his right. The weave starts again. Bank inward, cross flight paths, bank outward in scissors pattern. Carlson tracks 1-0, attempting to dive on a struggling, dauntless dive bomber below. He sees the enemy pilot's leather helmet through canopy reflection, sees the aircraft number painted on the fuselage. He fires a short controlled burst. 1 second, conserving ammunition. The Zero flicks smoke from its engine and dives away, trailing dark exhaust. Third confirmed kill, though Carlson isn't certain it's fatal. Suddenly, a lone Zero dives toward Yorktown's port flank at shallow angle, clearly targeting the carrier itself. Carlson breaks off his current engagement, pushes the stick forward into a power dive, engine screaming at redline RPM, wind whistling past the canopy frame. He brushes through mist from sea spray, horizon tilting 45 degrees. He levels out just as the Zero releases 2 torpedoes. They splash into the water, running hot and straight. The carrier lists slightly, evading both tracks. Relief washes over Carlson, but there's no time to breathe, no time to think. The radio reports Yorktown sustained minor damage from near-miss bomb strikes, estimated 20 minutes to stable flight operations recovery. Carlson's fuel line warning light flickers amber. He's running on fumes and adrenaline. 10:42 a.m., 15,000 feet, heading southwest back toward the Yorktown. McAllister is limping on reduced power. His Wildcat's engine sputters. Intermittently, oil pressure dropping. He radios. Engine failure imminent. Bailing out at 10,000 feet. Coordinates jackknife 7. Carlson must decide in seconds. Stay and escort or return to carrier. He chooses to follow and provide cover until McAllister's altimeter hits 6,000 feet and he can successfully parachute into the sea below. Carlson watches his wingman's canopy slide back, watches McAllister climb out onto the wing route. The slipstream tears at his flight suit. He jumps clear at 6,200 feet. The parachute deploys cleanly, white silk blossoming against blue sky. Rescue crews scramble from the destroyer screen, racing toward the projected splashdown coordinates. Carlson circles overhead, scanning for threats. The tracer line of the Zero that had locked onto McAllister earlier vanishes into cloud cover to the north, apparently withdrawing. Carlson banks away, knowing his wingman's fate could have been far worse if the Thach Weave hadn't worked, if they hadn't trained for mutual support under fire. Back on the carrier deck, mechanics led by Hopkins's maintenance team await aircraft recovery, tools ready. Carlson taxis in after a hard landing, tailhook catching the number 3 arresting wire, engines shut down with a mechanical sigh, propeller blades coasting to stillness. The deck crew scrambles to his wings, chocking wheels. He climbs down, legs shaking from sustained G-force and tension. He shakes Hopkins's hand, greasy, firm, reassuring. The flight log shows 3 enemy kills confirmed, fuel remaining 15%, ammunition 60% expended. The tactical advantage is turning in their favor. Hopkins nods toward the recovering aircraft. She held together, that's what counts. Thach's message crackles over the flight deck loudspeaker. Good work, VF3. Prepare for next wave. This is only the beginning. Carlson removes his helmet, feels salt spray on his face, hears the ocean wind. He knows this fight is far from over. Late morning, Yorktown's ready room beneath the flight deck. Commander Thach addresses the assembled pilots and senior maintenance personnel. A slide projector displays tactical diagrams. 2 side-by-side Wildcats, weaving in scissors pattern, with an overlay showing a Zero's predicted flight path and the resulting firing solution. He quotes the intelligence bulletin from September 1941 and adds, "This is our answer to their advantage." The mood shifts. Electric. Focused. The Wildcat pilots' sense of their role transforms from playing defensive catch-up to owning an offensive tactic. Carlson sits in the second row, foam earplugs inserted, lukewarm coffee cooling in a metal cup. He reflects on the minute-by-minute progression of the last sortie. The gun flashes strobing in his peripheral vision, the hiss of hydraulic lines under pressure, the prop-wash vortex turbulence shaking his helmet. A senior captain asks, "Will the Japanese adapt to counter this weave?" Thach nods slowly. "They will. They're skilled and disciplined. Then we adapt again." The logbooks must be updated to reflect the new tactical doctrine. Training programs change immediately. Not just individual dogfight drills, but coordinated 2-plane weave practice, radio discipline, mutual support protocols. Mechanics voice concerns about airframe fatigue, and parts wear from repeated high-G stress maneuvers. The Wildcat wasn't designed for sustained scissors combat. Hopkins speaks up. "We'll need more inspection intervals. Wing spars take punishment." Thach acknowledges this with a notation on the briefing sheet. Carlson steps out onto the flight deck, watches Wildcat's taxi back to the hangar elevator. He feels the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. It's no longer just his personal fight. It's becoming fleet doctrine, something thousands of pilots will learn and execute. The tactical innovation born from matchsticks on a table is now written into operational orders. On the water below, a salvage crew works near a Zero wreckage floating on the surface. Charred aluminum, blackened paintwork, oil slick spreading, proof that the tactic worked, proof paid in fire and fuel. 12:30 p.m., 23,000 feet, 10 miles ahead of the Yorktown Task Force screen. Carlson's flight is vectored to intercept a Japanese strike package heading directly toward the carrier group. He scans the sky methodically. No bombers visible yet, only glinting aluminum wings catching sunlight. Suddenly the radio crackles. Bandits bearing 290 degrees, altitude to 5,000 feet. Zeros sweeping in fast from high cover position. Carlson rolls left into defensive pattern, engages the weave with his new wingman. McAllister is still being recovered from the ocean, so Ensign Davis flies his wing now. Davis's hydraulics read normal, but his radio keeps cutting out. 1-0 locks onto Carlson's tail. The weave pattern begins again, mechanical and practiced. Carlson dives slightly to build energy, then banks hard right to cross Davis's flight path. He senses the Zero's position in his rear-view mirror without looking. Spatial awareness honed by repetition. He fires a short controlled burst as the Zero crosses his gun sight. The enemy aircraft's engine coughs smoke, trails fire, then drops away spinning. Fourth confirmed kill. Then a second Zero loops inside Davis's turn radius, trying to exploit the Wildcat's slower roll rate. Davis fires a deflection shot. His tracers converge on the Zero's cockpit. The enemy plane explodes behind the engine firewall, debris tumbling through air. Fifth kill for the flight. Carlson feels momentary elation turn cold as reality sets in. Two friends from his squadron did not return from earlier missions today. The cost is steep, measured in empty bunks and unfinished letters home. The radio crackles again. Torpedo bombers inbound. Yorktown's bow sector. Angels low. Carlson's gaze snaps downward to the sea surface. He sees glints of torpedoes slicing through. Water, white wakes trailing. The carrier begins evasive maneuvers, heeling hard to port. Time compresses. The fight intensifies. 12:45 p.m., 8,000 feet, above storm-tossed sea, sheet lightning flashing in distant clouds ahead. The Yorktown is under coordinated diving attack. Bombers screaming down from altitude, fighters providing top cover. Carlson and his flight charge into the maelstrom, bombers flying at wave-top level, anti-aircraft fire bursting like black flowers across the sky. Carlson's Wildcat shudders from near-miss flak concussion. Shrapnel pings against the fuselage armor. He weaves between bombers and escorting fighters, his own contrails merging with smoke trails from damaged aircraft. Fuel gauge drops below 30%, dangerously low. He pushes his engine beyond standard operating procedure, TOTHU 700 RPM, cylinder head temperatures approaching redline. The cockpit instrument panel flickers as electrical systems strain under combat load. He hears Davis over the radio. Taking fire, control surfaces hit, going down 2 miles out. Carlson banks hard and pursues the Zero that delivered the killing shot. The enemy pilot tries to roll away defensively, but Carlson anticipates the maneuver. He fires a sustained burst, 3 seconds, expending precious ammunition. Tracer rounds strike the Zero's wing route, severing fuel lines. The aircraft plunges, trailing flame and smoke. 6th confirmed kill. Carlson breaks off the attack, breathing hard into his oxygen mask. Now he's alone. Davis gone. Wingman lost. He radios. Hook 2 returning to ship. Ammunition critical. Fuel critical. The mixture of triumph and guilt presses hard against his chest. He descends through scattered clouds, scanning constantly for threats. Below, on the ocean surface, he spots a parachute, a small white dot floating near an inflatable life raft. Rescue craft race toward the position, small destroyers cutting white wakes through grey water. Carlson doesn't know if it's Davis or an enemy pilot. War makes no distinction in the moment of rescue. He sets course for Yorktown, engine vibrating, fuel warning light steady red. 13:12 p.m., carrier deck with Wildcats recovering in sequence. Carlson's Wildcat lands hard. Tailhook catches the number 2 arresting wire with a violent jolt. Arrestor cables screech under tension. Nose pitches forward as he brakes. The engine cuts to idle, propeller windmilling to a stop. He sits motionless for 30 seconds, sweat and salt crusting his face, hands still gripping the stick. Deck crew swarm the aircraft, signaling him to shut down. In the ready room below deck, Commander Thach holds the operational deck log, reading aloud to assembled staff. VF3 current status. 6 enemy fighters destroyed confirmed, 1 aircraft returned damaged, 1 pilot killed in action. Yorktown survivability assessment. Improved. Through effective combat air patrol. The statistics stand stark on paper. Clean numbers representing chaos and violence. Thach leans toward Carlson as he enters the ready room. You did your part, Carlson. Your aircraft, those mechanics, the doctrine, everyone contributed. But this is turning into fleet-wide operational doctrine now, Carlson says quietly, fatigue evident in his voice. Sir, are the Wildcats ready for what comes next? Can we sustain this? Thach's answer comes measured. We must evolve continuously. The enemy will adapt. We adapt faster. The camera perspective would linger on Carlson's eyes if this were filmed. Fatigue, professional pride, deep sorrow mingled together. Outside on the deck, recovery operations continue. Wildcats taxiing, engines roaring, deck crew shouting over the noise. The deck log later archived shows a notation. Enemy Zero pilot body recovered from sea, personal effects inventoried. It gives weight to what those 6 confirmed kills actually meant. 6 pilots who woke that morning, ate breakfast, climbed into cockpits, flew into combat, and did not return. War's arithmetic operates in absolutes. Carlson removes his gloves, notices his hands shaking slightly. Hopkins appears with a damage assessment form. They discuss the Wildcats' performance in silence, professional, technical, necessary. 17:50 p.m., Yorktown Task Force, steaming west into sunset. Carlson sits in the ready room, flight suit unzipped to the waist, squadron patch faded from salt and sun. Hopkins walks in carrying a fresh maintenance log sheet. Wildcat Bureau number 5193 will require complete engine overhaul after sustained high RPM operation and combat stress. Carlson thanks him with a nod. Hopkins shrugs. You kept her flying hard. That's the mission accomplished. The operational status board shows updated tactical doctrine. Thach Weave adopted fleet-wide effective immediately, training protocols distributed to all carrier air groups. Carlson walks out onto the open deck, leans against the island superstructure, watches surface foam trailing white behind the destroyer screen. He thinks of McAllister and Davis, both recovered alive, but Davis seriously injured, evacuated to the sickbay. He thinks of how the Wildcat, once considered inferior to the Zero in performance specifications, has through tactical innovation forced the Japanese fighter pilots to adapt their doctrine or suffer increasing losses. Historical records later showed the Thach Weave reduced American fighter losses by an estimated 40% in subsequent Pacific engagements. The hum of radial engines in the hangar below, the oil smoke smell drifting up through ventilation grates, the grease-fingered mechanics working through the night. These details echo in Carlson's mind as the foundational truth of victory. Innovation requires both insight and implementation, both tactical genius and mechanical reliability. He opens his flight jacket briefly, reveals 6 small tally marks sewn beneath his name patch in white thread, unofficial but acknowledged. He closes the jacket, buttons it, against the evening wind, turns his thoughts toward tomorrow's briefing. The war continues, the fight adapts, the doctrine evolves. On the horizon, storm clouds gather, dawn light, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, 6 months later, archive audio recording, American pilot debriefing. We executed the weave pattern and they broke off the engagement entirely. From the translated diary of a Japanese naval aviator, we observed the 2-plane trap forming in coordination and could not escape the crossing fire. Carlson's voice recorded for historical purposes. We fought with what we had available. We built a tactical doctrine. We trusted each other completely. And we fundamentally changed how the air war was fought. The scene would fade to grayscale archival images if this were documentary film. Wildcats in formation over Pacific waters, Zeros falling, trailing smoke, mechanics turning wrenches under work lights, flight logs being meticulously filled out. Final frame concept. A single Wildcat flying into sunset, 6 kill markings painted on its fuselage cowling. Caption text, Thach Weave, born of necessity, executed by courage and skill. Carlson stands on deck in the evening, silence settling around him despite the ship's mechanical noise. He carries the weight of all who flew and all who did not return, his voice in reflection. This became our story, not just mine, not just Thatcher's brilliant insight, but every mechanic who talked a bolt correctly, every pilot who trusted his wingman, every sailor who recovered us from the sea. Innovation in war is never individual. It's collective, it's tested under fire, and it's written in the logbooks with precision. Records show the Thach Weave remained standard US Navy fighter doctrine through the Korean War, adapted by jet fighters in modified form. The tactics saved countless American lives, forced adversaries to develop counter-tactics, and demonstrated that technological disadvantage could be overcome through tactical innovation and disciplined execution. The file closed without editorial comment. The operational numbers had already rewritten the doctrine of aerial combat.